evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you to this evening's council meeting. My name is Patricia McAllister and I am the Lord Mayor of Westminster. Before we start the formal proceedings this evening, I would like to take a moment to remember Honorary Alderman Barry Taylor, who sadly passed away last month. Barry served as a Labour councillor in Westminster from 1986 to 1990 in Bayswater, and then from 1994 to 2018 in Queen's Park, where he was a valued ward colleague. He was deputy leader of the Labour group and group whip for many years, and also served as chair of the Health Scrutiny Committee and a scrutiny task group on health and well-being. He was widely respected by both political groups at the council throughout his service. In fact, I have been given huge compliments on Barry from the opposition colleagues, which I think is just amazing. Thank you so much. Upon his retirement from the council, he was made an honorary alderman in 2018. His abundant legacy in Westminster includes his enthusiasm for promoting the interests of young people, including Trees for Christmas, an annual not-for-profit project that involved local young people selling Christmas trees each December. Barry was also the founder of the Paddington Festival and active with many local charities, including Paddington Arts and Paddington Farm. Our thoughts are with Karen and all the family at this sad time. Please now stand and join me in a minute's silence to remember Barry. Thank you. I would like to remind all members that we are live streaming this meeting, and therefore microphones will be active when members are speaking and the cameras will be broadcasting until the meeting closes. A list of all the members who are present will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Agenda item 1, appointment of relief chair. As I may need to vacate the chair during the meeting, I propose that Councillor Max Sullivan be chosen to take the chair as necessary. May I please have a seconder for my motion? Councillor Butler-Thalassis has seconded my motion that Councillor Max Sullivan chairs the meeting as necessary. Unless any member objects, the motion will be deemed to be agreed. If anybody has an objection, please say so now. Thank you. Councillor Sullivan, please join me on the dais. Thank you, Max. Welcome. Agenda item 2, minutes from previous meeting. Unless any member wishes to raise a point of order relating to the accuracy of the minutes, I will consider that members are content that I sign the minutes of the last meeting. Please state now if you wish to raise a point of order. Thank you. The minutes are agreed. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. It is necessary to declare any interests in relation to the issues on which there will be a vote. These items are set out in the list of speakers in the order paper. Members need to declare an interest in the items selected for debate if they are speaking in that debate. All members in attendance were asked to identify in advance of the meeting if they have an interest to declare. There is no need to declare an interest purely on account of being a council tax or business rates payer, nor a need for any member to declare an interest in the member's allowances item. If anyone has any other disclosable pecuniary interests or any other significant interest to declare, please do so now. We now move on to agenda item 4. The report of the Cabinet is in 6 paragraphs with recommendations on each section. I propose, as in previous years, to allow the one debate to encompass the budget and council tax item and the remainder of the Cabinet report before we vote on these. In accordance with statutory requirements, I intend to call formally recorded votes on the opposition party amendment and the recommendations of the Cabinet on the budget and council tax. With the agreement of both parties, the formally recorded votes will be undertaken by a show of hands. I will not ask the Chief Executive to call the name of each member of the Council. The names of those voting for, against or abstaining will be recorded in the minutes. We shall then move on to vote on paragraphs 2 to 6 of the report of the Cabinet. A list of those councillors who have been nominated to speak has been tabled on the blue order paper. This list also sets out the order in which the votes will be taken at the end of the debate. All speeches are for up to 5 minutes, except the few on the list who may be up to 10 or 20 minutes. Can I ask, please, that members keep to their allocated times as closely as possible. At 9:25 p.m, if the debate is still in progress, or at the end of the debate, if earlier, I will call the Leader of the Council to reply to the debate for up to 10 minutes. The division bell will then be rung to signify that the budget votes are to be taken by a formally recorded vote. Once the division bell has finished, no member will be allowed to enter the meeting until all the voting on the budget has concluded. I now call the Leader of the Council, Councillor Adam Hugg, to make his leader's speech.
Lord Mayor, it's my privilege to stand here this evening and set out this Labour administration's second budget for the residents of Westminster. As you know, we're meeting on the same day that this tired Tory government has delivered their final budget in office. The death rattle of a 14-year-long political project that has crashed the economy into the current recession, hollowed out public services, undermined our institutions, and left us weaker on the world stage. We've seen some fairly desperate pre-election bribes to voters who have long stopped believing anything the government has to say. They are not a party in power setting out a clear plan for the future, despite their tragicomic levels of projection on that particular point, but an increasingly chaotic bunch of political arsonists who are seeking to scorch the earth for an incoming government they know they will not be part of. In their national budget today, they failed to provide certainty on the crucial funding that thousands of Westminster residents have relied on during the cost of living crisis. The Household Support Fund, which has provided around 45% of the funding for work happening here in Westminster, has only been extended until the autumn. While this is obviously better than nothing, it means continuing uncertainty for our residents and families in need and for the programmes that Westminster and councils around the country have put in place to support them, with a potential cliff edge at the start of the winter months. Over 14 long years, local government has been a convenient scapegoat for the Conservatives' short-term scheming, with funding cuts and political blame being passed to the local level. Here in Westminster, we've seen central government funding fall by £350 million in gross terms, or £200 million net, since the Conservatives came to power nationally in 2010. So, Just as happened to the Conservatives here in 2022, it's time for them to be removed from power and let Labour get on with the business of governing in the public interest. So to the budget before us tonight. I want to first acknowledge the tireless work of Councillor David Boothroyd and the finance team, very capably led by Gerald Amroth and Jake Backus, formerly of this parish, who have worked hard over the past 6 months to ensure the delivery of a balanced budget. This is a budget that in difficult times safeguards the Council for years to come. This is a budget that builds on our record of delivery over the past 2 years, prioritising the issues we know matter most to our residents and putting them in the heart of decision-making. This is a budget which takes aim at antisocial behaviour with our new public realm CCTV. This is a budget that gives our home care workers the long overdue pay rise they deserve. And this is a budget that continues to provide support to the most vulnerable households. This is a budget for a fairer Westminster. Lord Mayor, I must emphasise in the current climate how fortunate we are to be able to keep delivering cost of living support, more affordable housing, improved high streets and enhanced public realm, alongside efficient and effective public services for our residents. Over the past few months, it's been impossible to ignore the mounting number of councils across the country who are filing for bankruptcy or coming close to having to do so. All local authorities under significant pressure, with demand rising, cost of service delivery increasing, thanks to an unhealthy dose of trustonomics that this country is still reeling from. And this crisis is further exacerbated by a complete lack of certainty around the funding with which is given to local governments, with the continued refusal by government to agree to multi-year financial settlements. Any funding they do provide comes with a laundry list of caveats and small print at the bottom. So not only does the recent £600 million in additional funding for local authorities fail to cover anywhere near the true cost of the pressures faced, the government was also very clear in their expectation that for a full rise in the general council tax and adult social care precept had been baked into their claims of increasing council spending power. In Westminster, we are fortunate to be in a better financial position than many other local authorities, some of whom are in the process of making very difficult decisions. But we're not immune from those pressures. This year, we've delivered over £20 million in savings through efficiencies and income generation, while dealing with an influx of homelessness caused by the current housing crisis and the government's short-sighted welfare policies. Our bill for temporary accommodation has skyrocketed and is now projected to cost us £38 million more next year than was planned when we met here a year ago. That's because we've seen a wave of 700 more households enter Westminster's temporary accommodation this year, and with a further 500 predicted to join in the next 12 months. It is a shameful fact that 1 in 23 children in London is now homeless, equivalent to 1 child in every classroom in the city, and around 1 in 50 adults. This has been driven by a number of factors, including a crisis in the private rented sector where rents have increased by 21% over the last year, and while the supply of suitable properties available for temporary accommodation is going down. And at the moment, the government seems to be busy making sure that up to 12,000 short-let properties in Westminster are permanently taken out of the housing market through new permitted development rights for short-term lets coming in before the necessary registration scheme and the Article 4 process that would give powers to the council in terms of planning. This would be snatching defeat from the jaws of victory by providing an amnesty for rogue landlords on an issue that both sides of this chamber have campaigned for many, many years. And we're pushing ahead at pace with our ambitious temporary accommodation acquisition scheme, but it will only go so far in stemming the tide unless the government makes the commitment to supporting effective homelessness prevention. And it's in this challenging context that we've taken our decision tonight on council tax. We have made sure that our residents continue to have one of the very lowest council taxes in the country, with a modest weekly increase of 46p for Band D households, which allows us to keep delivering vital council services and meet emerging pressures. We're doing everything we can to help our residents through tough times, while striving for a council that delivers effective services combined with a commitment to social justice. And Lord Mayor, nowhere has this been more evident over the past year than in our response to the cost of living crisis. We're now providing an extra £1 million in support for food banks and local charities, and additional winter support later this year, and a top-up of over £1 million to the Rent Support Fund in tonight's budget, bringing the total spend on cost of living support to £21 million. This has helped families with holiday activities and food, hardship support, debt and financial advice, boosted our local food banks and community activities with warm and safe locations. With the support of the Mayor of London, we've delivered the most ambitious expansion of the free school meals programme in London. This has given 14,000 children from ages 3 to 14 access to healthy, nutritious lunches and eased the financial burden on their families. This year, we're on track to deliver new community hubs across the city, one of our manifesto commitments, which will see a more integrated approach to improving access to the council, health and voluntary sector services. And I'm delighted that those voluntary sector partners who work so tirelessly to support our vulnerable residents are about to receive a boost too, with the first core funding grants the city's provided, worth £3 million over the next 3 years, to be awarded to 54 organisations over the coming weeks. As Councillor Butler-Francis can attest, the funding not only gives stability to the sector, but also supports organisations to fundraise more on their own, increase services and ultimately reach more of our residents. Lord Mayor, our commitment to fairer communities means helping keep and make our streets safer. And that's why I'm glad this summer we'll be rolling out our new network of 100 mobile CCTV cameras, which will crack down on antisocial behaviour. The new digital cameras will address problems that affect our residents most, such as vandalism, graffiti, fly tipping, replacing provision cut by the party opposite back in 2017. Lord Mayor, I want to turn now to the other crisis we're facing, and that is housing. More and more residents are in unsuitable or overcrowded accommodation or are facing eviction or homelessness. In Westminster, we're doing as much as within our power, increasing the number of council homes for social rent, improving existing housing stock, and ramping up our temporary accommodation acquisitions programme to try and meet the surge in demand. As I've mentioned before, we've invested an extra £85 million into our acquisitions fund to help us buy 270 new homes for temporary accommodation in and around the borough, with 60 acquired so far this year alone, and many more due for completion shortly. And our revenue investment in this budget will boost our ability to tackle homelessness, including providing more capacity to acquire yet more homes more quickly. And we will provide further capital as necessary to meet those ambitions. We're also looking at a range of other alternatives to provide more stable accommodation for homeless families and to reduce the pressure on the Council's general fund. Where possible, we want to keep people close to their jobs, schools, families, and minimise the disruption our residents face. But it's a challenge. So I'm delighted that, led by Councillor Noble, we're seeing real progress in the Council's own house building efforts. 300 Harrow Road was completed last year, and 61 homes that were previously earmarked for private sale were converted, making it an 100% affordable scheme, delivering 77 council homes for social rent and 35 intermediate units. Both Ebury Bridge and the Darwin and Balmoral House projects were topped out this year, and Ebury in particular is a great example of how our truly affordable housing strategy is driving up the number of council homes for social rent on completion. Thank you. So we've significantly increased the number of council homes for social rent, as I've just said on that scheme. And we've delivered, and we'll deliver ultimately the highest number of new socially rented properties in the borough for 50 years, unlike under the previous administration. Just this week, the council approved the joint venture partnership with Brown Tamble that will drive forward work to deliver hundreds of new homes and real community benefits in Church Street. At the same time as all of this, Councillor Begum is striving to improve our housing services for tenants and leaseholders, because we know there is so much more to do so that they get the service and duty of care from the council that they deserve. I'm thrilled that our housing offices are now becoming more accessible than before, thanks to 3 new estate offices opening across the city, with a 4th to come. And it's been a real pleasure to attend those openings and hear directly from residents how pleased they are to have offices on their patch once again after they were removed back in 2016-17, enabling them to hear the problems that they face to face. And there's lots of activity in this wider space to look forward to over the coming year. New compensations policy, a revised allocation scheme and repairs policy, which will form part of our attempt to drive up standards across the borough to better serve our residents. This budget includes new investment to ensure we meet the challenge of the ecological emergency declared at Council last September. This will be led by our newly appointed Cabinet Member for Climate Action, Ecology and Culture, Councillor Jude. We're working to entrench climate action in everything we do across the council, whether that's the investment in delivering Europe's largest electric waste fleet or in delivering energy efficiency improvements to at least 560 council homes in Westminster. The golden thread of climate action is also key in realising our fairer economy ambitions, which is why we're currently consulting on one of the nation's first retrofit first, though not retrofit only, policies in our partial review of the city plan. This will help us realise sustainable growth through delivering energy-efficient buildings. And we've been clear that if we're going to get to net zero in our city by 2040, the carbon cost of any scheme must pass a clear public benefit test about what it delivers for our city, rather than simply what it delivers for the bottom line of our developers. Our planned public realm improvements also have an emphasis on greening and carbon offsetting. And after successful public consultations at the end of last year, it's been heartening to see so many residents and businesses get behind our plans for Oxford Street, as well as for Regent Street and Haymarket. These schemes will be delivered in partnership with the private sector, with those who benefit financially, helping towards to deliver their costs. And finally, underpinning our enormous programme of work has been a steady change in the Council's approach and the way we interact with our communities to become more transparent, with more ways than ever for residents to get involved in shaping our city. Public participation in council meetings has increased their popularity, and even our Gen Z residents are turning out to hold their councillors accountable, with 17-year-old Alia recently asking a question about mental health for young people. Our citizens' assemblies have also been a success. Last year's Climate Assembly has been followed by another one for Westminster After Dark, bringing a diverse group of resident voices to help inform and shape future council policy. And thanks to the hard work of Councillor Sandquist, currently on maternity leave, our Commonplace Consultation Hub is up and running, making sure that residents are kept better in the loop about live consultations and as well as about major ongoing projects like the Seymour Centre's refurbishment. Lord Mayor, it will take longer than 2 years for us to reverse the inequalities in our city, which have been exacerbated by almost a decade and a half of Tory rule nationally. Lack of funding to local authorities that meant our budgets are stretched thinner year on year. But this is a council that's able to both take tough decisions today while investing for the longer-term gain of our communities. We'll continue to listen to the needs of our residents along the way, whether it's through stepping in to help people struggling with the cost of living crisis, taking innovative action on climate while the government backtracks on its commitments, overhauling the nation's high street for our residents, Londoners and visitors, or maintaining the roads, sweeping the streets and collecting the bins, the day-to-day services that our residents depend on us to deliver. And it's all too clear now that the tide is about to turn for the country in the same way that it did in May 2022 here in Westminster. Yes, we do, desperately. So does the rest of the country, Tony. The people, well, I think it's very difficult to see how it could be worse than the last 14 years of damage that you lot have done to this country. Yes.
Yeah. Very, very low.
Yes. Pluses and minuses, but clearly it was a lot better in 2010 than it is now, as virtually everyone in this country will agree with. People have had enough of their politicians pursuing culture wars when they're struggling to feed their families, find decent employment, or get a roof over their heads. And I'm proud to lead a council that is focused on fixing the fundamentals and set out today not only real achievement over the past 2 years, but real ambitions for the next 2. More affordable housing, reducing inequality, cleaner streets, a greener city, and most importantly, improved access to services and support. Make no mistake, this Labour administration is in it for the long haul because we are committed to the people of this city and we're passionate about delivering a fairer Westminster. And it's hope that in this chamber, this time next year, we'll have a government that's backing us to do that too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hugg. I now call Councillor Paul Swaddle to speak.
Lord Mayor, today I've heard an excellent budget. However, it's not the budget of this council tonight. It was the one delivered by the Chancellor. This budget, that was a budget that understands what this country needs and delivers an extension to the Household Support Fund to support those most impacted by the cost of living crisis, as well as investment in AI and technology to drive efficiencies in the public sector, as well as tax cuts for hard-working families. The budget before us tonight starts to show the true colours of this administration. Gone are the promises to freeze council tax. Gone are the illusions that they care for everybody in our city.
For 2 years.
This is not a budget for all. It is instead unfair on many. This budget and this administration, Lord Mayor, is disrespectful. It's been disrespectful for this chamber and its elected councillors. The administration has been announcing as firm plans various funding streams, CCTV cameras, all manners of other things, when nothing has been agreed in this chamber yet. These items are in this budget and will be voted on upon tonight.
Do you understand how this works, Paul?
There has been a flagrant disregard for procedure with consultations announced on Facebook without any councillors from any side having any details, and that is disrespectful. Our residents are also falling victim to this disrespect. The party opposite promises participatory budgets. Not there. Disrespectful. They promise a panel of experts to review the budget. Not there. Disrespectful. They talk about environmental concerns, but they hike EV charging more than some petrol cars. Disrespectful. Like lots of the fairy tales in their manifesto, promises not delivered. Disrespectful. This budget will impact residents hit hardest by the cost of living crisis caused by the war in Ukraine. Not only will they have the additional burden of a 5% increase from Westminster, but also the outrageous increases from the Mayor of London, which is an eye-watering 8.6%, taking the total increase in tax under this Mayor to 71%. Yes, you heard that right, 71%. And hopefully this will be his last budget.
I sincerely doubt it, given your candidate.
This budget gives the illusion of a balanced budget, but it's not what it seems at first. In truth, it hides what otherwise would be a significant increase in council tax if it wasn't for a massive dip into reserves to fund pet projects. This budget is nearly 12 million from reserves, which if paid for from the main budget would be an 18% increase on council tax. To afford this from the revenue budget would be a whopping 23% council tax rise. And what about last year? Another illusion of a balanced budget. There is a likely overspend of 3 million in the current year, equivalent to a near 5% council tax rise. And that's an additional overspend, with an additional overspend in the housing revenue account of 2 million. This is despite huge additional income from interest due to the rises in interest rates. And what does the future hold? Well, Labour have only kicked the can down the road with their use of reserves, and it will hit next year. The current gap for next year is 30 million, and that would require a council tax rise of 45%. We suspect many more horrors to come from this administration, not least as they get out of jail free card this year, interest rates will not continue. Now, Lord Mayor, let's turn to what would, and that's why there's a massive gap. Now, Lord Mayor, let's turn to what we would do for the residents of Westminster. Today, my group is proposing an amendment to freeze the core element of council tax. Yes, it can be done.
Disrespectful.
This fully funded amendment would make sure those that least able to afford additional costs in our city are protected from the increase that this administration would thrust upon them. My colleagues' contributions this evening will also highlight the issues that remain in the rest of the budget, which simply does not deliver a fairer Westminster. Turning to the details of the amendment. Councillor Boothroyd, in a recent press comment, said he could not see how council tax could be frozen. Yet here we have an amendment that does that. However, I would also point out to Councillor Boothroyd that Wandsworth, just south of here, are freezing their council tax.
They're using reserves.
So it turns out you can do it. And disappointingly, that also means Westminster is no longer the lowest council tax in the country.
Shame. Shame.
I call on all members present to back our amendment and ensure that hard-working residents are not burdened unnecessarily. This amendment has three elements that deliver a council tax freeze. Firstly, it will stop the Communities Priorities Programme process. This administration, which is a disproportionate, giving out money which is disproportionate to the costs. How can it cost 225,000 to give out 600,000?
Because it doesn't.
Instead, we transfer the community funds to the ward programme. This ensures that the funds are still available to the community projects, but can be distributed these funds practically at nil additional cost, providing greater opportunity for members in this chamber to be involved in key community decisions.
That's what you're really worried about.
These local panels are a waste of taxpayers' money. They have political motivations. There is almost zero public interest. And its ideology, well, all half a dozen of them, residents aren't engaged in these panels. Very few have applied. And that's after 3 extensions of the deadline. Many of those that have the same old faces which have been put forward by Labour councillors, not very representative.
Very
If only we had some local residents who had democratic legitimacy on behalf of wards. We do. They're the elected members of this chamber. And this is why we will move these grant budgets to the ward budget programme, boosting this well-established scheme. Secondly, we wouldn't set aside 450k of new resources for the ecological emergency. This is not the right time to commit such large sums to this project, not least as most of the green spaces in our city aren't even run by the council, but are run by the Royal Parks. But also, much progress has already been made on this area without this fund. As sustainability is key to tackling the ecological emergency, we propose to deal with this through the existing resources of the council by changing the way we work, not setting up costly separate functions. We will ensure a new approach to ecological diversity is embedded into everything the council does. And finally, we turn to the largest slice of savings. We'll reduce spending on temporary staff, something the party opposite has often called for. And the saving of 9% is achievable and would save a massive 1.3 million from a 15 million budget.
By magic.
We are you proposed it previously,
We
so it
told you
must
how
be
to do
okay.
it. We told you how to do it. We've done
No,
it.
you haven't. We have confirmed with senior officers that these savings would cover the full 2.99% and have worked it through with officers, and all we need for this chamber to do is to do the right thing for our residents, vote for this amendment and freeze council tax.
Yeah.
Now let's scrutinise some other aspects of the budget. In housing, there's another massive 7.7% increase for our hard-strapped council tenants. Oh, there is a fund to help some residents out with rent.
Yeah.
Is it coming from the administration? No. It's coming from the HRA reserves, which is rent that's already been paid in. They're simply giving people back their own money. And heaven help the leaseholders. The new major work bills are truly eye-watering and will burden many residents to the day they die. Councillor Boothroyd is known for his keenness on participatory budgets. However, all we get in this budget is the fake participatory budgets of the chaotic community grants programme, with another vague mention of participatory budgets in the report. At least we're now admitting that what you're delivering to date is not participatory budgets. There are some aspects of the budget we do welcome. The national support that sees small business rates multiplier freeze and the increased new homes bonus are very welcome, as is the extension of the household support fund announced today.
For 6 months.
Another area is the new approach to neighbourhood SIL. This sees a single councillor able to allocate funds without regard to what the local forum decides. This overriding is very concerning and something we'll be watching very carefully. Neighbourhood SIL is there for communities to mitigate the impacts of developments, not just a purse for councillors opposite to dip into when their other monies run out to fund projects. In planning, the continued drop in major applications is worrying for the longer-term prosperity and jobs in our city. There's been a 1.6 million drop in revenue, and this looks likely to continue under this administration. Without major applications, there will be no SIL, there will be no neighbourhood SIL to spend on these projects. The administration needs to decide how it can encourage major applications back to Westminster and not see us lose all the development opportunities to the City of London and Camden. And how are pavements and roads looking? Well, according to independent reports, our streets are getting dirtier. So I looked at the budget expecting to see a response to this rising problem.
We've put extra money
Well,
into
there
it.
there wasn't one. No, all I could find was a cut, yes, a cut in the budget for weekend street sweeping. Yet again, Labour deaf to the concern of residents.
Not weekend.
We do agree with some of the ideas floating from members opposite. We think there should be immediate investment in AI to ensure that the council is at the forefront of savings and to be had from this technology. Admin-heavy areas such as planning are an obvious area that's been mentioned in podcasts recently. In other areas, such as Report It, AI will only truly help when we make the services, not just the reporting tool, more flexible. We need to see more innovation and ultimately savings driven through this adoption. However, it's woeful that such a much trumpeted AI CTV monitoring scheme for fly tipping has not produced a single fine. Finally, Lord Mayor, I have a quote. Citizens' assemblies are a stupid idea. Can you guess who said this? No, it wasn't Councillor Devenish. It was Luke Apehurst, a member of Labour's ruling National Executive Committee, who also said, we already have elected politicians who are there put there by the public to take the tough decisions. It's an abdication of responsibility to farm these out to potentially unrepresentative panels with no specific knowledge or accountability. And more locally, Councillor Barraclough said in a response to a question, it would not be appropriate to offer any unelected body of residents a veto on spending money.
No, they don't.
Perhaps the party opposite should spend less time and, importantly, less money on biased assemblies and faux consultations and listen directly to the residents of Westminster and empower the elected councillors in this chamber to get on with making the right decisions for this city as they were elected to do so. So, Lord Mayor, I ask all the members opposite to show some respect for residents by living up to your promises, freezing the council tax and give residents a chance to navigate the cost of living crisis. Back our amendment. Back our
Quiet,
residents when they need us
please.
most.
Let the speaker
Lord Mayor,
continue.
I formally move our amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. I now call Councillor David Boothroyd to speak.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I thank Councillor Swaddle for the few brief moments of sleep during his speech. You wouldn't have known from his speech that he was part of a party that has led to the highest tax burden in 70 years, would you? Let me start with what we inherited. This Labour administration picked up a council which had had its central government grant halved in real terms and had to find 196 million of net savings over 12 years. The Conservatives scrapped the arts budget, closed youth clubs, removed CCTV, and still, Councillor Swaddle's leaving present for me was a budget gap of 61.3 million over 3 years, and that didn't include any significant pressures from temporary accommodation, because they hadn't happened yet. This year, hard work by council officers, the sensitive guidance of Cabinet colleagues, has found more than 20 million in new budget savings and increased income, which will not reduce services. And I want here pay a special tribute to Jake Backus, the former Director of Finance, now Executive Director at Hounslow, for helping over the past 2 years. With his help, this budget helps improve lives of people in Westminster. Using external funding, we have given home care workers a pay rise, improving recruitment and retention, and improving the service. We're reinstating CCTV against crime and antisocial behaviour 8 years after the Conservatives scrapped it. We're continuing to fund to enhance the GLA offer for free school meals for all. This budget enhances the waste and street cleansing team and supports the improvements to Report It. The new assistant means that making a report is a doddle. I know, I made one at the weekend. Less time than it takes for Councillor Dean to tweet it. We are continuing to support families with our 21 million cost of living fund. It is very difficult, though, to plan for the best when the government kept us waiting on what they were doing in the household support fund and have now just continued it for 6 months, leaving another cliff edge in September. Highlights from the £2.6 billion capital budget include an Oxford Street programme which is properly on track, highway safety work, especially for cyclists, and building genuinely affordable homes, including 1,000 new council homes on our own land. Environmental commitments include more decarbonisation of investment property, tackling the ecological emergency, and emissions-based parking charges, which the opposition have clearly now accepted because it's not in their amendment. Our charges for electric vehicles will remain the lowest in inner London, but will now be realistic. There are some people I know here who obsess over percentage increases. They can be completely misleading if the original or the starting point is unrealistically low. So if one element of the previous rates is so low that an 1,800% increase still leaves it as the lowest in its class, it was unrealistic to start with, and the previous administration deserves censure for depriving the council of a reasonable income that it should have collected. We have been hit, and I think this was the big gap from Councillor Swaddle. We have been hit by a wholly unprecedented demand for temporary accommodation. The council has a legal duty to provide it, and that is now forecast at an additional 38 millions in 2024-25. In 22 years on this council, I have never known a sudden demand of extra spending of that scale. To put it in terms that will be understood across the chamber, it's 6 whole mounds every year. It's not this council's doing, it's the result of a housing crisis which is wholly down to central government failing to manage the private rented market. It's a tribute to the amazing resilience that we have been able to put in place in this council, that we are able to present this budget while dealing with this extra demand, not cutting services. But residents and council taxpayers need to know this administration's plan to cut the costs. The last council started using Evente in 2017 for nightly booked self-contained temporary homes, knowing that they were very high cost. We are doing everything we can to end this wasteful spending. There was a capital budget allocation to acquire properties to use as temporary accommodation. We have near doubled it. And we have also set up a proper process to make sure we use this budget in the most effective way. We can't just buy up homes within Westminster, so we've set reasonable boundaries for the search. Our predecessors may have put in place a budget. They didn't set up a team to run it, so we've created one. But we will not try to save money through illegal gatekeeping of homeless applicants, nor by housing them in poor quality homes, nor by placing them hundreds of miles away. We will do right by our people. Our genuinely affordable housing programme helps as well. Every homeless family getting housed means one family off the waiting list, and most come out of temporary housing. But be under no doubt, had the TA budget pressure next year been just half of what it actually is, we could have funded all the Fair of Westminster investments, not touched reserves, not touched the temporary accommodation reserves, and cut council tax. That's how big it is, and it would still have been the biggest one-year imposition on the council budget. On the council tax level, we had a choice, but the alternative option means cuts in services and using reserves to subsidise a tax freeze. Failing to broaden our income when we know of risks to come would have put us at risk of having to impose crash cuts to services that families in Westminster rely on. Given the circumstances of this year, this budget offers the best option for long-term stable finances and better services, and therefore the best way to keep council tax low in the long term. In the previous 2018 to 22 term, and including the adult social care, the Conservatives raised Westminster's element of council tax by 15%, which was significantly over the CPI rate of inflation. So far, Labour's 2 budgets mean the Westminster element of council tax is 6% in real terms below the level we inherited. We have abided by our pledge to keep council tax low. And if you don't think that, look at social media, which is full of people from other boroughs complaining about how low our tax is. Every single London borough run by the Conservatives has raised council tax by 4.99% this year. And we don't have to look very far to do the comparison. My constituents in St Luke's Road look out from their front rooms at their neighbours over the road in the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, who are paying twice as much borough council tax. Twice as much. And the Cabinet Member for Finance is paid more than twice what we are paid over here. So that's something that, well, envy says, well, you're going to have to rely on it in the future, your allowance now, because you're not going to get it after May. When I look at the Conservative, despite their finances are in a bit of a state. So D-Luke actually sent in an external assurance review from SIPFA and found several areas where improvement in RBKC was needed. So when I look at the Conservative amendment, I think the Leader of the Opposition should have spent more time working on his alternative budget rather than looking for culture war bandwagons to jump on. I think we'd all have benefited from that. Reduced spend on temporary and agency staff is already included in the budget. Where is that 1.3 million coming from? It's just magic. To properly plan sustainable council services, we need stable budgets, and the amendment is destabilising. It threatens crash cuts in future years. It is tragic to see the Conservative Party destroying any reputation for economic competence that it once had. And I could call an unexpected witness on that. And I'm sorry on a personal level that Nikki Aiken is not seeking re-election. She's a very, very distinguished servant of the people of Westminster. But I was very interested because she went on Times Radio last week. And the host, Matt Chorley, put it to her, after 14 years of Conservative government, having had Liz Truss wreck the economy and ending up in such an economic mess in the recession, he said, quote, "The idea that the Conservative Party can lecture anyone on economic competence is quite a tough sell." Yeah. What did Nikki Aiken say to that? Did she deny it? Did she give excuses? Well, I mean, I disagree with her on a lot of things politically, but Nikki Aiken is very honourable and straightforward and put to her that Conservatives' economic credibility is shot. Her reaction was, quote, "Yes, I absolutely accept that. I take that on the chin. I absolutely accept that." So at a time when the OBR says pressure on local authority finances and services will continue thanks to this budget, the choice before this council is clear. Unaffordable short-termism which risks crash cuts to services and ultimately higher tax with the Conservatives, or the Labour budget, which protects and improves services and ensures long-term stable finances to keep taxes low.
Thank you, Councillor Boothroyd. I now call Councillor Caroline Sargent to speak. Thank you.
As we heard from Councillor Swaddle, there are lots of poorly thought-out ideas and pet projects in this disappointing budget. For example, the Communities Priorities Programme to reduce health inequalities, but only for some local people in a group they call the global majority, to be run by a tiny unelected local minority. We also know that near the top of their shopping list is the climate emergency. It was the previous administration that first called a climate emergency in Westminster, and we know it is important. However, they are prioritising spend here over many other essential areas, sacrificing community safety or facilities for children leaving care on the altar of net zero. And by dipping into reserves, they're not spending responsibly. It's important to point out that in the SIPFA Management Code at Appendix 9 of the Budget Report, the CFO has noted they need to develop an improved understanding of the costs of Council 2030 Net Zero Climate Emergency Plan. So while the focus on net zero is important globally, local people in our wards don't mention the climate emergency as their main concern here in Westminster when we knock on their doors. And I wonder how top of mind it is for residents in Labour-held wards who will now be paying more council tax to fund it. What people tell us they are worried about is crime and ASB in our neighbourhoods, particularly in our school communities. So we are getting data on ASB, but are they? Buried deep in scrutiny papers over a year ago was a reference to an ASB consultation. Ward councillors weren't informed, and we had to ask for the link to be shared with us. This happens time and time again. Either we're not informed or we're informed too late. It's not acceptable. But what of this ASB consultation? The resulting Westminster ASB strategy is all based on data sets from October 2021 to September 22 for the purposes of the Safer Westminster Partnership Strategic Assessment. There is no reference at all to any data collected from their consultation, and I'm not surprised as I doubt anyone knew about it. So I question the value of these consultations. If they're using them for decision-making and budgeting, we need to know the respondent demographics by ward, or even if the data was collected from people in Westminster. So if you're going to do consultation, develop budgets and strategies from it, do it right. And why are they making cuts to youth offending services when we know this service is already stretched and the youth ASB is skyrocketing? We were glad to see the announcement that CCTV is finally coming, as you've heard us in the chamber asking for CCTV to help tackle crime and ASB. The headline in this budget is that £1 million has been allocated for CCTV, but what is it actually for? Is it to tackle rubbish dumping following the failed AI trial? Is it to tackle ASB? We have numerous cameras on our housing estates, but has this resulted in residents feeling safer? And is it properly funded? 600,000 of that is shown as allocated from reserves, and we know how careful they will have to be spending money from that pot. Where will the rest of the funding come from, and for how long? So in St John's Wood, working with the Met Police, we have moved ahead with what will essentially be our own system of CCTV, which cannot be moved to other wards. And this is key, as who will decide where these 100 units promised by them will be located? We are being asked to approve spend on something that may end up in just a handful of wards, and the police won't have full access to it. How will council officers act on the data and information from these cameras? We know the unit cost of Met cameras, including monitoring and installation, so we query whether the CCTV proposed will offer value for money for all of Westminster. But the biggest issue is the lack of police officers on our streets. So while Labour are spending money on pet projects, our school children are being mugged or increasingly engaging in antisocial behaviour themselves. And because this administration won't call out the Mayor for failing to recruit more police, we know he's got the money and he's had years to do it. He, Sadiq Khan, has effectively handcuffed the police in their ability to investigate and enforce law and order in our city. So roll on May the 2nd when Susan Hall will come in and sort it out. The Minority Party has consistently been calling this Labour administration out for not focusing on getting these basics right. We're not here to tell them how to do it, and we're also not going to enable these undemocratic and wasteful projects and programmes. We don't want to see more rough sleeping, and we understand the pressures regarding temporary accommodation. So every penny counts. It always counts, but especially in these times with the war still raging in Ukraine. But raising council tax to spend public money on declarations of climate emergency while our most vulnerable and marginalised communities shoulder the burden is unnecessary and shameful.
Well done, Caroline.
I know, thank you, Councillor Sargent. I now call Councillor Aisha Less to speak.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would like to first say how proud I am of my colleague, Councillor Rocker, for his hard work in this council as lead member for Children's Services. He did a fantastic job steering Children's Services before handing the reins over to me. So a big thank you to Councillor Tim Rocker. Lord Mayor, it has been an incredibly challenging year with the cost of living crisis waging on. Children and young people dealing with the legacy of pandemic, lockdowns and cuts, with crime numbers slowly creeping up in Westminster and across London. I am proud to be part of an administration that, in the face of these huge challenges, has worked tirelessly to ensure that children and young people have the best life outcomes possible, to build fairer communities and to crack down on the antisocial behaviour that can threaten the well-being of residents and visitors to our city. When we first set out to build a fairer Westminster almost 2 years ago, a key commitment was to ensure that Westminster was a great place for children to grow up. To do this, we have really put our money where our mouth is. Last year, we invested £80,000 in our school uniform fund to help struggling families pay for their children's school uniforms. To date, only 770 families have benefited from this additional support. Parents and caregivers told us that they often feel the pinch during the school holidays, and so we've expanded our holiday and activity food programme to the half-term holidays. In 2023 alone, this has helped approximately 4,900 young people taking part in engaging and enriching activities during the school holidays. The HAF programme also provided almost 50,000 hot meals to children who may not otherwise have had one. A key commitment in our Fairer Westminster plan was to create more opportunities and to strengthen the support provided to children in care and care leavers when transitioning to adulthood. That's why last year we'll now consider care leaver alongside protected characteristics, which commits services across the council to providing opportunities and support to young people with care experience to improve their outcomes. Fostering a safe and welcoming city is a key pillar for our Fairer Westminster strategy. To help residents and visitors feel safe in our city, last year we increased the number of city inspectors in our neighbourhoods up from 76 in 2018 to 80 full-time staff members. And we made it easier to get support from our dedicated noise team. We take our commitment to safer communities incredibly seriously, and these changes ensure that we're tackling persistent and complex issues in priority areas, providing support for residents and communities where it is needed most. Despite a number of challenges this coming year, record numbers of young people across the country are seeking help for their mental health, and falling birth rates across London mean that we have to rethink some of our core services, our excellent children's services officers, and I will work to ensure that Westminster remains a fantastic place to grow up. I will continue to work with schools and mental health professionals to fully embed mental health support teams into every secondary school. Cracking down on the antisocial behaviour and crime that blights the lives of residents across Westminster remains a top priority, with an investment of £600,000 into a new public realm CCTV network to be rolled out across the city. Later this year, 100 new cameras will be installed in priority areas across the city to really keep an eye on areas where residents have told us there are ASB issues. Westminster's vibrant nightlife is world famous, and from the multicultural eateries of Edgware Road to the legendary music venues in Soho, there is always something to see and do here at night. This year we will publish Westminster's first evening and nighttime plan, Westminster After Dark, after wrapping up 6 months of consultation with residents, visitors, workers and business owners. This plan will outline a vision for what our city will look like at night going forward, a plan that truly reflects the diverse needs, aspirations and desires of everyone who lives, works in, visits or runs a business in the city. Lord Mayor, when I spoke in this chamber almost a year ago and outlined last year's budget, I spoke of my unwavering passion for making a difference in our communities. This budget is a product of that passion and sets out the many ways which myself, my colleagues and officers at the Council are striving to create a fairer Westminster, one where children and young people are supported to live happy and healthy lives, communities can thrive and prosper, and everyone who spends their time in our city feels safe and welcomed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Less. I now call Councillor Narsika Butler-Falassis to speak, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. My speech will focus on 3 areas of spend in the budget where I feel that as a Cabinet member I have had the most impact. I will start with adult social care, where we have included 1.2 million in the budget to fund a pay increase for home care workers. The opposition had decades to do something about this, but they didn't. We signed the Ethical Care Charter and we put the Charter into practice. This is after years of obfuscation from the Conservatives, who argued that there was no problem in this area and that home care workers were indeed being paid London living wage and were being paid for travel time. This was never true. They were effectively being paid minimum wage and travel time. This pay increase, worth on average £220 per month for 450 people, has already led to home care workers asking to increase their hours, which will make a real difference in recruitment and retention rates, and ultimately to the quality and continuity of care received by our most vulnerable residents. The opposition, however, called this in and then claimed that it was in order to ensure that this was permanent. Yes, the biggest threat to it being permanent is that lot ever being in power again. Moving on to public health. 4 years ago, while in opposition, I made a speech about how important it was that public health didn't just fund schemes that told people what to do to be healthier, but worked with grassroots organisations and communities to embed healthy activities in ways that worked for local people, in the community centres and organisations they visited already, where they don't face the usual barriers of access, cost, language and travel. That's why I'm so pleased that Public Health has funded £5 million to 32 voluntary and community organisations over 3 years to do exactly this. This funding, in combination with the £3 million of funding through our voluntary sector core grants, going to 53 organisations, will build the capacity of our voluntary sector and give Westminster hubs of activities that are affordable to all and accessible to all. The opposition are the people who defunded our youth clubs and cut all the voluntary sector grants programmes. We brought it all back, bigger and better than ever before. Now, a family in Westminster can access a huge range of activities for their children and their adults. They can access legal advice and they can access specific support services for family members who are disabled or members of the LGBTQ community, and they can access support that is culturally relevant to them. I'll name a handful of the successful organisations, including Dutchpot Social Club, North Paddington Food Bank, Paddington Law Centre, Pimlico Toy Library, South Westminster Community Festival and Caxton Youth Club. Which takes us to the Community's Priorities programme. This is a programme started in election year by the previous administration, when they suddenly took an interest in North Westminster and decided to relent to pressure from officers to do something about deprivation. Under the Labour administration, the programme has expanded, now covering many more wards in the south as well as the north, giving out £600,000 worth of grants per year. But the Tories absolutely hate this programme because it is participatory budgeting and it includes a lot of engagement with local people. They want to cut this element completely because, as far as they are concerned, talking to local communities is bad, finding out about the local needs is a waste of time, and having local people make decisions about how money should be spent is absolutely the worst. All these things might lead to the empowerment of communities in deprived areas, and that is very, very bad for the Conservatives. It's one thing to empower local communities in Marylebone to respond to highways consultations, but not the people of North Paddington to decide what activities they want in their local area. But this is the Tories' budget amendment. They would rather we sack some of our community's team and stop talking to people so that we can reduce council tax by a few pence per day. And one final word from me on the other agenda item, the members' allowances. Our members' allowances are very low by Central London standards, certainly much lower than in neighbouring Kensington and Chelsea. All allowances are low, but comparatively the lowest are those of cabinet members who are essentially given a full-time job to do for the all-inclusive sum of 28k per year. Low member allowances are not a good thing, and the reasons the Conservatives kept them so low was to discourage people from modest backgrounds being able to do their job. It's absolutely. And I hope our future government will legislate to make councillor allowances...
Your time is up.
Yep.
Thank you.
To make councillor allowances fair and commensurate to their job.
Sit down, everyone, please. Let us continue. Thank you, Councillor Butler-Thalassis. I now call Councillor David Harvey to speak. And please, can we have a bit of hush for these well-prepared speeches, everyone?
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, Lord Mayor. And now time for a cool bar. I don't do cold bars. Oh, it's that way. Okay. So, Lord Mayor, like Hemingway said, and the residents of Nottingham, Birmingham, Thurrock, Croydon, and perhaps shortly Barking and Dagenham are finding out, bankruptcy happens gradually and then suddenly. What's the sudden bit? The sudden bit is when the bill arrives on your doormat and the first you know about it. When you find out it's done. Those residents are dreading what's happening and coming their way from the collapse of sound local government finance. This morning, Michael O'Higgins, former Audit Commission chair, said the time to stop financial crises like Birmingham is now. Not when the extra bills land on doormats. This budget and HRA, they start to point to a mountain of debt in uncertain times. It starts Westminster on the road to Birmingham. It risks making the quality of life of residents a hostage to that debt. And the leader of Birmingham said that too. Pessimism, perhaps. But we've seen failure across local government and social housing. And I'm not blaming any one particular party or not. It has simply happened. The outcomes are always higher bills or poorer services, generally both for residents. And today's world is the world of Putin, Trump, or a new pandemic. And like it or not, no one in Downing Street, after May or November or whenever, is likely to put a great big slug of money into local government. Yet in these papers, one of the major mitigators of risk is sending more bills to residents, up the rents, up the service charges. The budget papers say so. So I want to speak simply for the neighbours, tenants and leaseholders who will pay if the HRA goes the wrong way. The budget and the HRA are a political swing away from prudence. Taking the third sector's media definition of a troubled council as one with debts, twice core spending power, from these papers, HRA capital debt alone is racing to compete with that statistic, with debt approaching $1 billion in the 30s. From the start, the HRA budget should not just mention risk mitigation as rent increases and rescheduling work, but should make the most positive commitment to manage ambitions to protect the quality of life of our residents. And proposed borrowing should match that and be tied to it. When contracts are signed and shovels are in the ground, it's too late. It's an afterthought. And major risks tend to crystallise not in ones, but in twos and threes and fours. That's our lived experience in the last few years. You need a series of manageable stop-goes, traffic lights, to reassure residents that your ambitions will match the situation and their pockets. But then, renters and leaseholders are already paying for this budget, as others have discussed. A maximum rental increase of 7.7%. I cannot find many social tenants, even the more prosperous ones, getting anything like 7.7% more in their pockets. While just under half of our residents, I was one, you see, once, believe it or not, some of us Tories do come from the working classes, just under half of our residents get substantial benefits. The rest don't. Many renters have seen nothing like that pay increase. Of course, and I praise the continuation of the relief fund, I think that's excellent, but many won't benefit from that. Potentially, though, as it's from the HRA, it takes money from the badly off to help the even worse off. What about leaseholders facing massive service charges? And carbon neutrality is praiseworthy, but then PDHU. The world has changed, and I think in your thinking, you've got to change some of that planning. I applaud you making the council the lender of last resort to really, really hard-up leaseholders, but you need to go much further at a time of incredibly difficult economics and labour market contraction and price rises. You need to pull some of these things back for the longer term. But amid all the big plans, the stats show that resident satisfaction with repairs has hardly moved on the dial. We still need to see work that will move the dial for residents. The administration wants many new housing officers, yet they run away like water through a sieve with vacancies for uncovered estate roles and constant change undermining communities. We talk about technology and what it can offer, but we're still at base camp 1, even compared to G15 housing associations, and that's difficult to face up to. Many of us on both sides bear a responsibility for that. The work needs to be prioritised today, not some of the grander plans that you've set out in this budget. Lord Mayor, the budget, like this administration, should aim to do better, but do less to do better, particularly in housing. Optimism that everything will go right is decried by reality. Freeze rents, leave the money with the tenants. Evaluate the capital spend and refurbishment programmes. Find ways to let officers have the freedom to take some of that pressure off. And remember, Lord Mayor, it's all very well to ask officers to produce mitigation plans. That's their job. But leaders at Clarion, Peabody, Network, Birmingham, Woking, Nottingham, they asked for mitigation plans too. And when the pigeons came home to roost, it's the residents
Councillor
that
Harvey,
paid.
your time is up.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Your time, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. I now call Councillor Jeff Barraclough to speak, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm going to talk about our plan for a fairer economy. This aims to maintain the standing of London's West End, revive our local high streets and help our residents into good jobs. A thriving West End is good for Westminster, good for London and good for the nation. And we're working hard with our 18 business improvement districts to ensure the voice of business is at the heart of this council. We meet regularly talking about waste, licensing, toilets, crime, greening and so on, working in partnership to make life easier for traders, for workers and for residents. Oxford Street alone accounts for 5% of London's economy, and we're taking the fight to the candy shops and working closely with NWEC, London's largest bid, on the Oxford Street programme. And I'm pleased to announce that we've signed the agreement to jointly fund the Stage 2 design work, and we'll be presenting detailed plans to NWEC's members and local residents in the coming days. And we hope to start construction on Oxford Street in the autumn, subject to a final funding agreement. And when we finish Oxford Street, we'll start on Oxford Circus, and then Regent Street and Haymarket and Waterloo Place, working with the Crown Estate. This council, in partnership with the private sector, can transform the West End and build a modern, green and inclusive public realm that will attract investment from all over the world. Now, this investment itself, of course, needs to be sustainable and inclusive, because great businesses want buildings with the latest environmental credentials. And our new planning policy will encourage large-scale refurbishment of commercial buildings so they are fit for today's tenants and ensure we meet our zero by 2040 target. This is retrofit first, not retrofit only. We will still need new buildings, but demolitions will need to be fully justified and developers will need to show the public benefits of a new scheme cannot be delivered with a retrofit. We want to encourage investment outside the West End too. I've identified 4 brownfield sites in the city plan where we think we can support new houses, offices, shops, healthcare and logistics. Good development, bringing good growth for our city. The second part of our Fair Economy plan is to support small businesses in the context of local high streets. We've taken Harrow Road with its 230 units as our pilot. We've had focused engagement from the business team, begun a major public realm scheme, helped set up a traders association, mapped land ownership and kicked off a shopfront improvement programme. Our focus has been extended now to Paddington and the Edgware Road, and we've begun scoping new projects, including public road improvements on Praed Street and Five Ways Junction, activation of vacant space, more shopfront improvement grants, and so on. We'll publish detailed plans in the summer. Lupus Street and others will follow in due course. Finally, and most importantly, our Fair Economy plan will connect our residents with the well-paid, fulfilling career jobs on their doorstep. Employers tell me their single biggest headache is finding talent, yet within walking distance of the world-leading businesses of central London, we have people working hard but struggling to make ends meet. The plain fact is, hard work alone is no longer a route out of poverty. People need training, skills, self-confidence and connections. And that's why we're taking a strategic approach to employment and skills. We've set up the Anchor Alliance, including British Land, Grosvenor, Microsoft, the Zoo, Imperial and others, working together on local hiring, skills and employability. We've established Westminster's first Education, Employment and Skills Board, bringing together employers, training providers and funders to map the skills gaps. For example, from September, you can train to be a retrofit assessor at the Green Live Learning Lab at the Westminster Adult Education Service. This will give residents the new skills demanded by the real estate industry as our new planning policy promotes the refurbishment of our building stock. But it's one thing to put on courses, but we need to engage the community and find the people not working or working in low wages and help them realise their potential. That's where the Digital Dash came in. That was a competition for teams of local young people to design digital products, each team mentored by one of the world-leading businesses HQ'd in Paddington. The Digital Dash gave young people skills, confidence, exposure to great companies, and critically, connections. I asked the CEO of Cognizant, the giant IT services contractor, whether he'd hire any of his team members. He said he would take them all if they wanted. Investing in the West End, reviving high streets, and great jobs for our residents. That is a fairer economy for Westminster.
Thank you, Councillor Barraclough. I now call Councillor Lorraine Dean to speak.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In the budget papers, Councillor Fisher said projects in the capital programme must run to budget and to timetable, and if they do not, this poses a risk to the budget. Not only is this a risk to the budget, but a risk to providing essential services to our residents. It is regrettable that I have to report a number of delays in both children's and adult services, and how this is impacting on the lives of our most vulnerable residents. Family hubs, which were started by the Conservative administration, are transforming families' experience of services to help easier to access. They are renowned worldwide as centres of excellence, particularly our Besborough and Portman hubs. The hub based within a physical building is integral to the integration of specialist teams across each local area. It is tragic that this Labour administration does not seem to see the urgency in developing the Queen's Park Family Hub in 3rd Avenue, an area of high deprivation. According to the Early Help Strategy 22-25, it was set to open in September 2023. In Appendix A, General Fund Capital Programme, it is now due to be completed in the years 25-26, if there is no further slippage, and at just over £4 million, probably much more than it would have cost in September 2023. In Crumpton Street, in my ward of Little Venice, lies the derelict previous youth offending team building. It has been empty for over 2 years, and when I inquired what is happening, I was told no decision has yet been made. We are in desperate need of homes for care leavers, and for every care leaver who is housed in Westminster will save Children's Services £10,000 per leaver per year. Yet we can afford to let such a valuable site stand empty. In Appendix A, 8.2 million is set aside with completions in years 26-27, but there is no indication what this is for, nor why is it taking so long to develop this site. In January 2023, I spoke in this chamber how this Labour administration has failed our adults with learning disabilities. In April 2022, the Conservative administration had found a suitable building to house a new state-of-the-art facility for community access Westminster's daycare services. Architectural plans were produced, providing a large sensory room, 3 multimedia rooms with communication aids such as eye gaze, 2 accessible kitchens, and a large physiotherapy room with ceiling hoists and room for specialised treatments. Nearly 2 years into this administration, and the only mention in this budget is that a feasibility study is currently underway to consolidate the services onto one site, with Droop Street, the main site, under consideration. There is no mention of any money being set aside for this project and no timeline. So once again, adults with learning disabilities have been sent to the back of the queue. May I also add here that the building in Droop Street is totally unsuitable, and its position on the northwest edge of the borough means a resident in Pimlico would have a long, uncomfortable journey to reach the facility. Not ideal for a person with complex needs, showing there has been little or no thought put into providing these much-needed services. We desperately need specialist housing for people with learning disabilities and complex needs. Before the last local election, Councillor Robertson and I called to speed up the developing the Carlton Dean site in Maida Vale. This development would provide specialist housing for people with learning disabilities and extra care housing for older people. Nearly 2 years into this Labour administration, this project does not seem to be a priority. The construction contract has not yet been awarded, and although the old buildings have been demolished, the site has not progressed since July 2023. I cannot find a timeline for the completion of these much-needed facilities. Labour like to talk the talk about a fairer Westminster, but yet again, they are not being fair to our most vulnerable children, our elderly, and adults with learning disabilities.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. I now call Councillor Matt Noble to speak, please.
Bizarre, Tony. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to start by congratulating my colleague, Councillor Ryan Jude, who took over the Climate Action portfolio from me in January. The progress that we've made and the change in the mindset of this council has undergone in tackling the climate emergency over the last 2 years is remarkable. The whole Cabinet is behind Ryan as he brings his considerable experience and enthusiasm to take this work to the next level. In the same spirit, I want to use my time this evening to reflect on the difference this administration has made in less than 2 years. We are fundamentally challenging a 57-year orthodoxy of how public services are delivered in Westminster. Our commitment in a fairer Westminster is that our homes should be well managed, sustainable and genuinely affordable. And last year I spoke about how our regeneration strategy had changed to achieve this. I'm delighted to report that this has happened. Since December, we have handed over the keys to 112 truly affordable homes at 300 Harrow Road. This is one of my... Not Rachel. This is one of my proudest achievements as a Cabinet member because that's more than... That's 60 more households on the waiting list who got a family-sized property than would have done under the previous administration. Under this administration, many residents in our new social housing flats benefit from air source heat pumps, solar panels, rainwater collection and living roofs, a result of combining regeneration with our environmental commitments. Opposition members may think this is, to quote the new Foreign Secretary, green crap, but let me tell this council that this really matters to our residents when their energy bills are lower. The budget before council this evening contains investment to build even more truly affordable homes. And we're getting more bang for our buck as we have reversed the bizarre policy of the previous administration of snubbing money being offered by the Mayor of London. Not thank you, Rachel, thank you, Sadiq. Using this extra cash, we are progressing the regeneration of Church Street, which we're set to deliver up to 1,120 new homes, as well as a new library, reinvigorated market and high-quality public realm. Last week, the Cabinet approved the appointment of our joint venture partner, Mount Anvil, which will deliver the first phase of the regeneration of the neighbourhood. Site A alone will deliver 429 new homes, with an additional 73 homes to social rent on top of the 98 that we are reprovisioning. 171 homes to support my colleague, Councillor Begum, in housing the residents that need our support the most. Later this year, Phase 1 of our flagship regeneration project in the south of the city at Ebury Bridge will be completed, providing 226 homes. Across all phases, there are 131 additional social rented homes compared with the previous plans. Not thank you, Rachel. As our plans for building truly more affordable, environmentally sound homes for the future progress, we can't lose sight of the importance of housing quality and security. Councillor Begum will shortly speak about what we are doing for our tenants and leaseholders, but we all know how out of control the private rented sector is currently proving to be across London. And that's why this year we will launch our Private Renters Charter to support people renting from private landlords in the city, providing them with information on their rights and information on how we, the council, can support them. Furthermore, we'll be increasing our enforcement on rogue landlords, adjusting licensing procedures and providing support to private renters across the city. To free up homes for private renters and tackling the housing crisis, we must also tackle the blight of short-term lets in our city. 12,000 homes in Westminster have been swallowed up by the short-term letting market. And while we welcome the germinal beginnings of action from the central government, the register and planning permissions will achieve next to nothing if the government excludes existing short-term lets from the new planning requirements as it currently plans to do. We are making representations to government on this point and we hope that sense will prevail. Lord Mayor, I'm already proud of this young administration's record. Our regeneration programme and our approach to supporting private renters is barely recognisable from just over 2 years ago. And I'm determined that this will mean that Westminster in years to come will be unrecognisable from Westminster of recent times. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noble. I now call Councillor Ed Pitford to speak, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And I know you mentioned rainwater collection. The only rainwater collection I've seen in my ward is through people's ceilings and into their bedrooms. Great Britain, the country which won 2 world wars, fighting back when it appeared all hope was lost. The country that gave us the World Wide Web, the jet engine, the light bulb. The country that's home to an entrepreneur who dreamed of going to space and went on to commercialise spaceflight. We have some of the world's best scientists, incredible entrepreneurs, and some of the greatest minds right here in Westminster. And do you know what kills me? What makes me so unbelievably disappointed is when I see a graph showing us as a council failing to reach zero carbon by 2030, and that line being described as highly ambitious, projects not yet planned, no funding identified. 2030 is less than 6 years away. Buying offsets to get us to net zero is not value for money and should be avoided.
Item 2 of your amendment was
The lack of ambition, of drive, of determination is not good enough. The weight of responsibility on your shoulders should not allow you to accept a failure to meet a target to be described as highly ambitious. If you cannot solve the problem, set the challenge to our academic and business communities. This lack of ambition continues into the PDHU. The latest report implied that you couldn't find a sustainable heating system for less than £50,000 per dwelling. I appreciate that's what your consultants are telling you, but they need stretch targets. Consultants, just like any contractor, need managing. They need visionary leadership. They need to be sat at their desk until they can come up with a solution that works for the environment, works for residents, and is affordable. Coming up with a £180 million solution and then blaming the government for not funding it is beyond ridiculous. On the 9th of November 2022, 16 months ago, I stood in this chamber and said electric combi boilers with residents purchasing green electricity is the answer. And yet somehow this wasn't even considered by the consultants. Consultants costing hundreds of thousands of pounds, I might add. I'm not throwing out these ideas just to have an opposing opinion. I worked at a global retailer doing their 2030 zero carbon plan. I've installed hundreds of millions of pounds in solar power. I've commissioned both ground source and air source heat pumps. There is hope though. I have faith that Councillor Hugg has made a smart move in appointing Councillor Jude to his cabinet. But we now need a sense of urgency and motivational leadership that has been lacking to date. I would note the word action in the cabinet member's job title. We have seen, however, that decarbonising crosses all departments, and raising of parking charges on electric vehicles was a prime example of making the task more difficult. The fact that Councillor de Moldenberg could stand there and brazenly say that he had not even bothered to look at the congestion figures that he had apparently brought in this policy to solve shows that we have a much greater challenge ahead of us. And so from now on, I vow to be much stronger and more vocal in opposition, and the Cabinet should be prepared for this. I want the Cabinet to go home this evening and reflect on the work that you have to do, the position you're in to effect change, and how rare that opportunity is. And then tomorrow, I want you to come into work fighting, ready to solve these problems, to not take no for an answer, and to be the leaders that you were elected to be. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I now call Councillor Lisa Begum to speak, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In November 2021, I made a speech on that side of the room about the housing crisis and how I had lost my mother and sister to COVID because they could not self-isolate due to living in an overcrowded house. Councillor Harvey's response to me was, "One day you'll understand when you're a leader, but probably not in Westminster." Well, here I am today, lead member for housing in Westminster. Who would have thought a girl who has grown up in Westminster's social housing stock would be cabinet member for housing? Finally, someone with lived experience making decisions that actually support residents. As I have said in this chamber many times, housing is an absolute priority for this administration, and the last 12 months have been critical as we work hard to deliver on our housing commitments. I firmly believe progress is being made in rebuilding the trust of residents, which was practically non-existent 2 years ago. Our housing improvement programme has undertaken a comprehensive review of the entire housing service. We're not there yet by any means, but the service is gradually becoming more customer-focused with a culture of continuous improvement. And I would like to acknowledge and thank Sarah Warman and her leadership team who are driving this forward. Reopening our estate offices has been a real highlight for me this year. The offices have brought housing officers closer to residents to ensure that we're delivering a compassionate and joined-up service, something the previous administration appeared to have abandoned with their closure in 2017. I'm also very proud that we are currently developing new people-focused policies in areas of real importance to our residents: repairs, homelessness and allocations. First and foremost, our policies will enable us to help our residents, not provide reasons to continually say no. We want to deliver a simpler scheme for allocations, one that understands composite need and reduces the reliance on points and balances the priority given to long-term residents. On repairs, we want to set higher standards and expectations and improve performance, because too often the timeliness, communication and quality of repairs are not at the standard our residents should expect. But Lord Mayor, this is all against the backdrop of a persistent national housing crisis, which is being felt so acutely across London. More households are approaching us for support than ever before, and the projected cost of temporary accommodation continues to rise, with the latest figures for 24-25 sitting at 38 million. We are moving at pace with our acquisitions programme thanks to our additional investment of 85 million in the last budget. This is not only reducing our reliance on third-party providers, but keeps families in good quality housing that is crucially close to their communities. Demand for temporary accommodation is an enormous challenge for local authorities nationally and places enormous pressures on the HRAs of many. At Westminster, we want to provide for residents whilst being financially responsible and planning for the future, and it is for those reasons that we are proposing the maximum rent uplift. This is a necessary and responsible decision to safeguard the future of the HRA. It will also provide an additional 6.7 million to improve the condition and quality of our existing housing stock. Although this is consistent with all local authorities across London, we are very alive to the significance of this uplift for our residents, especially in the cost of living crisis. That's why we've extended the rent support fund for another 12 months, with over £1 million set aside for those who need help the most. Having also introduced additional support for leaseholders for major works bills, our payment plans are the most generous of any London borough, with our newly introduced discretionary service charge loan on top of our many other options. Work is underway in exploring potential options for the PDHU, which requires investment to improve efficiency and reduce carbon emissions. In reality, this should have been done decades ago. With each year that the opposition refused to deal with this issue, it has resulted in residents dealing with constant leaks and constant repairs raised, which merely put a plaster on the problem. With the PDHU at end of life, we cannot afford to do nothing, and we understand that this is a sensitive project that requires careful consideration of the impacts on our residents. Alongside Councillor Jude, we will be working closely with residents over the coming months to identify an efficient, cost-effective solution, which in turn will also help us reach our net zero goals. Lord Mayor, the change we're wanting to achieve isn't going to happen overnight, and while we do all we can to support our residents, a lot more has to be done by central government at great pace to resolve the housing crisis. But despite the national challenges, I remain committed to our ambition that all residents should, as a basic, expect to live in a safe, warm, secure home that is well maintained. That, to all of us, is a fairer Westminster.
Thank you, Councillor Begum. I now call Councillor Ranger to speak.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It's an honour to be standing here tonight as the new Cabinet Member for Climate, Ecology and Culture, continuing the great work of Councillors Noble and Rocker and covering some of Councillor Sanquest's portfolio. Thanks to all my colleagues for their hard work and their warm welcome to my new role. Lord Mayor, now more than ever, we're seeing the impacts of the climate and ecological crises on our daily lives, increasing our energy bills, flooding our streets and damaging our natural environment. Tackling this is a huge challenge for councils all across the country, even more so during this time of significant financial strain. That is why, unlike another budget delivered in Westminster today, we need ambition. We need a budget that shows those in charge are taking these matters seriously. And that, Lord Mayor, is what our budget does. We've made significant progress on tackling the climate emergency this year, being named the top city council in the UK for climate action. Decarbonising 17 times faster than the Conservative administration did in their final year in charge. And it was acting on our manifesto promises that helped us to achieve this, putting residents' views first and being a more transparent council with our first Citizens' Climate Assembly, retrofitting hundreds of homes, issuing our local climate bond, and ensuring that our award-winning environmental justice measure is used in our decision-making. We've changed the way this council treats the climate crisis, but we know there's a lot more to do. This budget will continue that progress, with reducing residents' energy bills top of the list for me, and I'm pleased that over £200 million is earmarked for retrofitting in the HRA. And of course, the climate crisis is intrinsically linked with the degradation of our nature. I was proud that we declared an ecological emergency last year, bringing us in line with many other councils in the UK. And this year, to further build upon our success on environmental action to date, we're investing £450,000 to expand the capability of our brilliant climate emergency team, delivering an integrated approach to achieve efficiencies across the council, ensuring that we don't solve one environmental problem at the risk of harming others. This will help us to accelerate our work to embed climate considerations and decision-making across the council. And I'm looking forward to delivering a climate adaptation plan later this year to improve our city's resilience to the baked-in effects of our changing world. The party opposite would have us ignore these effects and have us be unprepared for the damage this could cause to our residents, to our businesses and to our city. Except, it would appear, Councillor Pitt-Ford, it's good to see that some of you still care. But while most national and local Conservatives step back from dealing with these crises, we will continue to lead the way on local action. While my previous role focused on these green areas, I'm also incredibly happy to have added new parts that I care passionately about to my portfolio. Our residents regularly tell us how access to high-quality leisure facilities can radically improve their lives. This is why we're beginning work on the much-anticipated refurbishment of Seymour Leisure Centre, after investing £40 million into the project last year. And we'll be launching our updated active Westminster strategy, which will look to address the barriers our residents face when looking to get active. And I'm genuinely absolutely delighted that Councillor Rocker has given me culture as well. Westminster is the centre of London's cultural offer, at the very heart of our city, with a huge variety of world-class cultural institutions right on our doorstep. And this brings huge opportunities too, with lots of musicals and over a quarter of all jobs in London in music, performing and visual arts based here in Westminster. But a fairer Westminster is one in which every resident not only has the opportunity to access, experience and see these cultural assets, whatever their background, but one in which they can access the wealth of career opportunities that exist in these sectors too. This year, I will work to ensure these opportunities are as accessible and inclusive as possible. Lord Mayor, the climate and ecological crises affect every one of us here in this chamber, and leisure, culture and libraries remain critical to the lives of our residents and the vibrancy of Westminster. We need ambitious, decisive action to tackle the twin crises and to ensure that our offer on my portfolio's areas remain top class. That's exactly what I plan to do as a new Cabinet member, and that is what this budget will help us to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jewett. I now call Councillor Paul de Moldenberg to speak, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. First, I'd like to say how welcome it is there are so many young people in the gallery tonight, and I hope that the experience encourages as many of you as possible to get involved in local community affairs and the council as well. Lord Mayor, our job is about delivering for our community. It's about getting things done. And this is what we've been doing for the past 2 years while maintaining one of the lowest council tax in the country. On cycling, we have installed 80 secure cycle hangars, providing nearly 500 spaces, with more to come. We've installed 191 cycle stands, providing nearly 400 spaces, with more to come. We've got the first cargo bike hangar in London, with more to come. We've got 6.2 miles of new or improved cycleway, which has been consulted on, and a further 4.5 miles more immediately after the mayoral elections. And we've successfully introduced a Westminster-wide network of 330 e-bike parking locations through contracts negotiated with the 3 operators. Of course, there's still a lot to do, but this is an excellent start in establishing the first borough-wide e-bike parking network in London. On food waste recycling, we've collected nearly 2,800 tonnes of food waste to be recycled. We've now got 60 neighbourhood food waste bins. We've got 266 residents signed up for the on-demand food waste recycling service, and there's currently 114,000 residential properties with access to a food waste recycling service. And because of this action, we are now in the top 10 of the most improved recycling rates nationally, and we're top, yes, top in this category in London, with a 3.7 increase in recycling compared to last year. Well, now we held 3 community recycling days at Queen's Park, at Churchill Gardens and Tollgate Gardens. The next community recycling day is in Pimlico North Ward at Lillington and Longmoor Estate. Before May 2022, there were no community recycling days in Westminster. And we've successfully implemented a new road surface at Elmfield Way, featuring 92% of recycled materials. This is the first time such a high percentage of recycled material has been used on any road surface in the UK. We've got 40 electric refuse vehicles brought into service, saving £1 million in fuel costs. We now have the UK's largest electric refuse collection fleet, and we've reduced our fleet emissions by 50%, equivalent to 2,000 tonnes of CO2 each year. We've launched London's first bookable loading bay for freight EVs. It's the future of deliveries in central London, reducing vehicle movements and cutting carbon emissions. And we brought forward 5 new School Street proposals and relaunched the Schools Clean Air Fund for improving air quality outside schools. We're keeping Westminster streets clean 24/7, 365 days a year, and I want to give a particular thanks to the team for their work during the coronation and following the many marches and demonstrations we've had this year in Westminster. We've increased the number of street washings along Westminster's high streets and busy commercial and residential areas from once a year under the Conservatives to 4 times a year with Labour. Queensway, Bayswater Road, St John's Wood High Street, Edgware Road, Warwick Way and elsewhere now have a deep clean every quarter, keeping them looking fighting fit all year round. And there's more, but I'm running out of time. 1,000 more EV chargers, the micro-logistics hub in Pimlico, more Green Man crossings, more dropped curbs, more curb build-outs, and more trees. And finally, we're launching our after launching our investment of £35 million last year on active travel, we're launching a sustainable transport strategy later this year, which will promote active travel and sustainable transport to deliver greener neighbourhoods, cleaner air and healthier lives. Lord Mayor, I am proud to stand before you tonight as part of a Labour administration that has kept our city running smoothly and effectively over the past 2 years, and I can assure you that this budget means we plan to continue just that, and all with one of the lowest council tax in the country.
It gets gets 10 seconds. Come on, be generous. Councillor de Moldenberg, thank you.
Pleasure, Lord Mayor.
I now call Councillor Tim Mitchell to speak, please.
Lord Mayor, the Environment, Climate and Public Protection Directorates, as in previous years, are budgeted to make the Council a surplus. In the coming financial year, a further £6 million savings are planned, which is dominated by an additional revenue of £2.9 million from the recent parking charges policy review. This review will be a cash cow for the Council. As well as this £2.9 million, there is an additional income of £3.25 million already in the current medium-term financial plan. This means that drivers of all types of vehicles over £6 million more each year to fund council services. I've no problem in principle that there are banded charges based on vehicles' individual tailpipe emissions of carbon dioxide, likewise with an additional diesel surcharge for pre-2015 vehicles, which something which Councillor Scarborough and I introduced, is still in place to address the emission of nitrous oxides. However, over 50% of residents will pay more than they do at present for parking permits, including EV vehicle owners will pay for the first time for permits. No. Westminster has a proud record of keeping its streets clean, and we pay tribute to all the hard work of the officers, particularly during the coronation, the Queen's funeral, for all the hard work they did. However, in this budget, Labour are cutting weekend winter street cleaners and instead making a vague promise of bringing additional sweepers depending on weather patterns. Also, in the West End, it's facing a cut of 8 street sweepers in the busy summer months. And again, there's another vague promise to bring back additional sweepers on an ad hoc basis. These proposals are putting Westminster's street cleaning gold standard at risk. Lord Mayor, the Environment, Climate and Public Protection Directorates are an important part of the Council with a dedicated team of hard-working officers. It is unfortunate that the Labour administration is using climate change to justify increasing charges for drivers by over £6 million a year, including charging EV car owners, residents and indeed casual parkers for parking far more than they have at present. The Council should be encouraging EV drivers rather than punishing them. Lord Mayor, I was quite astonished by the comments made by Councillor Butler-Thalasis defending the 45% increase in cabinet member allowances, whilst ignoring that all other councillors, irrespective of the background, are being left further behind by this administration. Councillor Butler-Thalasis was also being deliberately misleading about the Conservatives' position on home care workers. We did not oppose the principle of the increase, but challenged that they have only funding the increase for 1 year from reserves, but Councillor Butler-Thalasis have failed to convince her colleagues to fund this initiative from the Council's core budget. She should have done better. Lord Mayor, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. I now call Councillor Paul Fisher to speak, please.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Every year at full council, for 5 minutes, I put on my cloak of impartiality. I'll see if it lasts for the full 5 minutes. But I will say this. It's been a privilege to chair the Budget Scrutiny Task Group again this year, and I want to thank all members who participated in that and provided their input and their many talents into that process so that we could produce the report, which I'm sure everyone has read from cover to cover. I start this year where I finished off last year. You may remember that last year I asked Cabinet members to attend the Budget Scrutiny Task Group, which hasn't happened for years, so that they could defend policy decisions that impact upon the budget. That is exactly what happened this year, and I want to give my thanks to Cabinet members for their attendance, for defending their positions in front of members. That's how local democracy should work, and I'm really pleased that they did that again for the first time in years.
I also suggested that we bring the process forward so that members could have more meaningful input into the budgeting process. We did that as well. We had 3 meetings in November and another in January following the announcement of the local government funding settlement. Next year, I want us to improve on that. Whether or not I'm chairing the BSCG, I would like more detailed information to be provided by officers. I want more detailed reports, not just presentations. And I know the officers behind me are listening and will act. I also just want to say that, of course, there are a number of risks identified in this year's report. I'm telling no one in this room anything new when I say the biggest risk here for our local authority is that of temporary accommodation pressures. Now standing at about £28 million worth of financial pressure on our budget, it's going to be £38 million in the next financial year, a 20% increase since the beginning of 2022, what will be a 33% increase by the time we get to the end of the next financial year. Our priority as a city must be to protect the most vulnerable. And I, as I know members on the opposite side of this room were, I was shocked during the Housing and Economic Regeneration Committee that we had on Monday to hear that the Home Office is giving notice, days' notice, to successful applicants for asylum to reintegrate into the housing market within days. And I know there are members on that side who think that is appalling, because it is. It places pressure on local government finances, but it also provides for a deeply human impact that none of us can or should ignore. Just briefly then, I want to say thank you as well to the officers who've contributed to this process. Jake Backus has already been mentioned. Regrettably, we've lost him to another local authority, but our loss is their gain. I'd like to thank Gerald Olmerath as well, who's always been helpful in making sure I understand the figures. So thank you very much, Gerald. And also Claire O'Keefe, without whom this just couldn't be done. So thank you very much for your help as well. Finally, I just want us to leave with one thought. Whether you agree with it or not can be open for debate afterwards. But this council has been obsessed for decades with the objective of having the lowest council tax in the country. That is a poor barometer of the health of our city, a poor barometer of the effectiveness of our budget. And I want to say that I think ultimately an adult approach to budgeting, an adult approach to local government, will always see council tax as a means to an end and not an end in itself. And I think this budget recognises that, and that's why I'll be voting for it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. That is the end of the debate. Does anyone who hasn't spoken wish to contribute briefly to the debate? Thank you. I now call Councillor Adam Hogg to reply to the debate.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor, and thank you to everyone for their contributions tonight. My Cabinet have set out, both in writing and in their speeches today, an ambitious vision for the future of this council, one that we have been delivering for the last 2 years, will continue to deliver for 2 more, and hopefully for many years to come after that. We have heard from the opposition some interesting and important points that we will address in time, but a lot of carping and confusion. I know expecting consistency from a Conservative right now is somewhat wishful thinking, but it's nice, having seen their video on social media today, to hear them agree that a freeze in the general element of council tax is a council tax freeze, despite them very loudly and aggressively claiming last year that it wasn't. This has been noted, and I'm sure we'll expect a consistent approach from the party opposite in the years to come. But everyone expects from their party right now, after the last 14 years, the proposal before us today is a mixture of sleight of hand, cuts to services, and some irresponsible gambling on the council's finances. The reality is that despite inflation being much lower back under the Conservatives' last administration, they raised the general rate of council tax on adult social care precept by 15% over their 4 years in office. And this year, every Conservative local authority in London is doing what... No, David did. We are different people. including every Conservative authority in London is doing what we're having to do tonight, including our neighbours in KNC who charge more than double our rate of council tax. We know the party opposite places a limited value on community engagement and community capacity building, given its amendment. And it also has a slightly confused approach to participatory budgeting, simultaneously claiming that we're not doing it and then trying to cut us when we are actually doing it. And I think we also need to recognise they're opposing the investment needed to make real progress on improving biodiversity and greening here in Westminster. What we're talking about with the biodiversity investment is equivalent to about 6p a week or £3 a year investment of the council tax to rightly protect our city's ecology over an issue that so many of our residents are rightly passionate about, and as Councillor Jude said, is an integral part of us meeting our wider climate goals as well. The Conservatives obviously have raised the issue of temporary and agency worker spending, and they're right that when we're in opposition we challenge their use of temporary and agency worker spending as not the most efficient use of public money. So what has happened over recent years? The direction of travel on tax is clear, moving from a peak in 2019-20 under the previous administration of over £27 million in council spending on temporary and agency workers to 15.7 in the first year of this administration. That's a big cut, as I'm sure you'll will agree, in terms of making, and we are making sure that we over the last year.
Do you understand the difference between 22 million and 15 million, though, Paul?
So over that year, we gave very clear instructions on day one to ensure that we were keeping tax low, and we are matching. We are on track to match that this year that we've just had. So that means the council is spending almost £1 million less on temporary and agency workers now than in the last year of the Conservative administration. They're now the lowest levels they've been since 2015. And while we will continue to try and keep further downward pressure on costs in the coming year, it isn't prudent to bank on immediate savings from such an approach at this time of rising pressures on the council's budget. Notably the temporary accommodation issue highlighted tonight, driven by the failures of this national government over the last 14 years. And Councillor, I just want to also draw attention to a few little points of correction. This budget very clearly sets out the potential downward path of interest rates. That is built into the budget gap figures now, unlike what Councillor Swaddle said at the beginning. You did very clearly say that. So it's important to correct the record. We have planned for the fact that we hope, as the economy stabilises, that I hope interest rates come down. I do remember Liz Truss raising them, so we do hope they come down. So, technically, absolutely, you need to own the record of your government in terms of damage to this economy, because ultimately that is causing pressure on our services, is causing pressure for families, and we need to be clear that that must come to an end. There's a range of things that we've been doing tonight. Obviously, we've talked about the issue with rent increases, and Councillor Begum has very clearly set out why it is important that we are protecting the HRA at the time of increased pressures. To be very, very clear, 2/3 of Westminster's tenants receive full support for their rent from housing benefit or the housing benefit element of UC. So obviously that does mean that 1/3 of our council tenants do not, which is why we created and targeted the rent support fund at the third of those who would be actually having to pay the increase themselves. That is the focus of the rent support fund. So it means that any resident who wishes to apply for it will be able to effectively get the cost of the rent increase covered this year as last year, due to to help them through this time of economic challenge and a cost of living crisis, because we are focused on helping people at a time when the government is not providing the level of support to councils to deal with the real challenges we face in terms of housing, across, not just here in London, but across the country, dealing with turning around our stock and improving services. It's a national crisis, but here in Westminster we're taking action to help our residents at a time when every social landlord in the country is raising rates by the same rate as we are doing, but we are providing £1 million to tackle the cost of rent for those people who are most likely to bear the challenge of it. That's all right, that was my previous job and I don't plan to go back to it anytime soon. Obviously, we've talked about the Pimlico District Heating Undertaking, and I'm conscious that Councillor Begum and Jude are taking things forward in a pragmatic way to make sure that the costs to residents are kept as low as humanly possible, dealing with the legacy impact of a system that's at the end of its working life and causing increasing problems in terms of damage to people's homes and increasing costs to the HRA in terms of running it. But we'll be pragmatic about this and working wherever possible to get additional funding, as well as ensuring that any costs to leaseholders are spread over the longest period of time and through, as Councillor Begum said, what is already the most generous scheme for payment deferments in existence in London. So, we've heard a lot of things tonight, and I'm not going to hold you up any further. Because tonight, we've heard some fancy finances from that lot over there, the team who brought you the £6 million Marble Arch Mound and sent £35 million of council funds up in smoke, paying contractors not to do anything on Oxford Street for years. They are not serious people. We have an opportunity to make a choice for the country this year. The choice for our country and our city this year is simple. Culture war, confusion, cynicism, cratering economic growth and cuts to public services with the Conservatives, or a serious long-term approach to governing from Labour that combines compassion with pragmatism. Here in Westminster, we've done our part by giving 14,000 children free school meals, provided school uniforms for 1,500 families in need, provided £3 million for core grants to support our amazing voluntary sector, provided a new commonplace consultation hub. Oxford Street, going nowhere under the Conservatives, moving forwards under Labour, bringing back CCTV, but this time focused on our residents' priorities, signing the Ethical Care Charter and delivering on its commitments by boosting carers' pay. We're building hundreds more council homes for social rent, over 300 more than the previous administration plan, and we will continue to do more. We have provided the £1 million rent support fund for tenants who are not covered by benefits, as I've said. Networks of over 300 doctors' parking bays, 3 housing contact centres and 1 on the way, £35 million investment in active travel and greening, £10 million investment in improving high streets, and £21 million to tackle the cost of living crisis. There is a lot more set out in the budget. There'll be a lot more set out in the delivery plan that'll be launched in the coming days. I am proud of the work that we've been doing in very difficult times to help our residents, to stand with them, and to provide a real alternative vision for the future we've talked about for a long time, and we're now delivering in power. So thank you, and I commend this budget to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Hugg. We now vote on the Opposition Party Amendment and Business and Financial Planning 2024 to 2025 to 2026-27, which is paragraph 1 of the report of the Cabinet. As mentioned at the start of the debate, these will be recorded votes by a show of hands. Therefore, before I call the first vote, the division bell will now be rung. Following this ringing, no member will be allowed to return to the chamber until after all the votes have been completed. I would ask you all to keep your hands up a little bit longer. Yeah. Are you okay? Yeah. Okay. The first recorded vote by a show of hands is on the Opposition Party amendment to the Budget and Council Tax, moved by Councillor Paul Swaddle and seconded by Councillor Caroline Sargent. This is set out on the blue order paper. I mean, keep your hands up for a little bit longer because the votes are being recorded. Those in favour? Those against? Thank you. Those abstaining? There is clearly a majority against the amendment. I therefore declare the amendment to be lost. The names of those voting for, against or abstaining will be recorded in the minutes. We now move to the recorded vote on the recommendations in paragraph 1 of the report of the Cabinet, Business and Financial Planning 2024 to 25 to 2026 to 27. Those in favour? Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Those abstaining? There is clearly a majority in favour of the recommendations. I therefore declare the recommendations to be carried. The names of those voting for, against or abstaining will be recorded in the minutes. We now vote by a show of hands on the recommendations in paragraph 2 of the report of the Cabinet titled Capital Strategy 2024 to 25 to 28-29 to 29, forecast position for 23 to 24 and future years forecast to 37 to 38. Those in favour? Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Those abstaining? There is clearly a majority in favour of the recommendations. I therefore declare the recommendations carried. The next vote by a show of hands is on the recommendations in paragraph 3 of the report of the Cabinet titled Integrated Investment Framework 2024 to 25. Those in favour? Thank you. Those against? Those abstaining? There is clearly a majority in favour of the recommendations. I therefore declare the recommendations carried. We now vote by a show of hands on the recommendations in paragraph 4 of the report of the Cabinet titled Treasury Management Strategy Statement for 2024 to 25 to 2028 to 29. Those in favour? Thank you. Those against? Those abstaining? There is clearly a majority in favour of the recommendations. I therefore declare the recommendations carried. The next vote by a show of hands is on the recommendations in paragraph 5 of the report of the Cabinet titled Housing Revenue Account 30-Year Business Plan and Housing Investment Plan 2024 to 2025. Those in favour? Those against? Those abstaining? There is clearly a majority in favour of the recommendations. I therefore declare the recommendations carried. Our final vote on this agenda item is on the recommendation in paragraph 6 of the report of the Cabinet titled Pay Policy 2024 to 2025. Those in favour? Thank you. Those against? Those abstaining? There is clearly a majority in favour of the recommendation. I therefore declare the recommendation carried. That is the end of the voting on the report of the Cabinet. Thank you. So we now move on to agenda item 5. This is a report from the General Purposes Committee titled Member Allowances 2024 to 2025. We will now vote by a show of hands on the recommendations in the report of the General Purposes Committee titled Member Allowances 2024 to 25. Those in favour? Thank you. Those against? Those abstaining? There is clearly a majority in favour of the recommendations. I therefore declare the recommendations carried. That concludes this evening's council meeting. Thank you, and I wish you all good night.